I don't really like Halloween in real life. Something about it makes me feel overly exposed. I know Halloween is typically thought of in the exact opposite terms, as an opportunity to hide in plain sight, to disguise yourself, to put on a mask, to express yourself in creative terms, a time of year everyone is to some extent an artist, a time of year for assuming an alternate identity. But that's exactly what feels so revealing about it all, to me. When you put on a mask, you're telling people how you'd like to be seen. By showing you how I'd like you to see me, I'm implicitly telling you how I see myself. In a certain sense, putting on a mask is the most revealing thing you can do. Halloween feels a little too much like wearing your secret self on your sleeve, and to me, the scariest scary movie is less unnerving than the reality of dressing up and going out. Which is just a long way to say that rather than actually going out on Halloween, I'd like to stay in. And in the lead up to the holiday, there are, of course, classic horror movies I like to watch and some great music to listen to. The soundtracks to the original Suspiria and House are especially great. And of course, there are all kinds of horror games that you can play to celebrate the season. But I wanted to talk about one game in particular, a game that came to consoles just last year, but which has been an object of great fascination, even fanaticism, for a while. I'm talking about Inscryption, a game that I'd call the perfect Halloween video game. Not just because it's scary, there are a lot of scary games, but because it takes as its subject the whole point of Halloween. Masks, disguises, surprises, creativity, artifice, and identity. Inscryption originally published for PCs in 2021 and then came to consoles a year later. It's very difficult to discuss this game without revealing spoilers, so I'd like to say up front that you should absolutely play this game before watching the rest of this video. If you haven't played it yet and think that spoilers don't matter, or that spoilers don't matter to you, I can assure you that Inscryption is a special case, and that so much of its energy and strength come from the unexpected formal unravelings here. I'll be getting into specifics in just a minute, but before the uninitiated leave to go play the game for the first time, I'll just say that Inscryption is a card game that functions along the lines of a roguelike, in which you find yourself trapped in a cabin with a mysterious figure who holds you hostage and demands you play him in a card game. As you learn the rules and begin defeating him, you occasionally get up from the table and interact with the objects around the cabin, combining the card game with an escape room scenario. After that, things get escalatingly weird, with a dive into found footage, retro RPG gameplay, an emotionally devastating finale, and a concrete alternate reality aspect of the game, which has led to real people literally going to coordinates given out in the game and digging up physical artifacts. In short, it's a dizzying experience, and I couldn't recommend it highly enough. With all that said, for those who have played the game, a brief summary might be in order just to establish the frame of reference for the rest of our discussion. After navigating a bizarre opening screen in which you literally cannot select New Game and must select Continue, you begin by playing a card game against Leshy, a strange man who has trapped you in a strange cabin. A lot of things here are strange, not least the violent nature of the card game itself. Your deck is comprised of various animals, and in order to summon some, you must sacrifice others. Every time you lose, Leshy throws you in a room and makes a card out of you with the flash of a magical camera. When the flash fades and you seemingly wake up, you're back at the table playing cards again. You're stuck in this Sisyphean loop until some of your cards begin speaking to you. The Stoat, the Stink Bug, and the Stunted Wolf all communicate with you and give you hints on what you need to do to escape the cabin. These tasks include winding a clock, unlocking a safe, stealing a roll of film, and eventually, gouging your own eye out. When you, quote, escape the cabin, you view found footage from a YouTuber named The Lucky Carter, real name, Luke Carter. He performs between a camera and a green screen, theatrically opening decks and hoping to find rare cards. One day, he opens a pack of Inscryption cards, a rare game which had a limited run, and finds that one card has coordinates written on it. Like a true YouTuber, he embarks on a journey to figure out what's buried there, filming himself all the while. After a bit of digging, he discovers a floppy disk, also labeled Inscryption, apparently a digital version of the card game. We continue to play, now in a retro RPG, and realize a few things. One, that we've been playing as Luke this entire time. His exclamations will occasionally punctuate our own gameplaying with remarks like,
I think I just beat him! Oh.
Second, we realize that Leshy was one of 4 scribes, spelled like Inscryption itself with a central Y, rather than a central I. which is a very important point we'll discuss more in a little while. These 4 scribes created cards and imbued them with the power of other beings, caught in different ways. The graveyard-dwelling Grimora captured entities with her quill, Leshy with his camera, the robot PO3 with his scanner, and the magician Magnificus with his brush. You, the player, are the challenger, who has come to replace one of these scribes. And one by one, you defeat them. All the while, though, things are getting weirder and more dangerous for Luke. We learn in further found footage that he's attempted to discover the mystery behind this digital copy of Inscryption, and contacts the game's developer, Game Funa. This company, in typical corporate fashion, simultaneously denies all knowledge of such a game and threatens to take legal action against Luke unless he surrenders the floppy disk to them immediately. A representative from Game Funa even arrives at Luke's front door, attempting to intimidate him into returning the floppy disk. Clearly, this sets off alarm bells for Luke. He realizes here that something is unique about this disk, and, more importantly, that he has a story. He has the makings of a great video. He quickly loses motivation for making his more traditional kind of content and pours everything into Inscryption. He even calls the woman who sold him the pack of cards at a garage sale. It turns out the cards belong to her daughter, Casey, who unfortunately died. We learn that Casey worked at Game Funa, and in fact was one of the key people working on designing the game Inscryption. In more ways than one, she's responsible for the game we're playing. We keep playing. In this third act of the game, we've now become the hostage of PO3, who is in the midst of a coup overthrowing the 3 other scribes in an effort to take control of the entire world and bring about what he calls the Great Transcendence. Like in Act 1, you're trapped at a table with him, forced to play through a hologram version of the game you just played in Act 2, where you journey to different quadrants of the globe to defeat 4 bosses. This is the segment of the game during which the different gameplay modes coalesce and become more than the sum of their parts. Mechanically, Act 3 is probably the most enjoyable and rewarding section. Finally, when victory seems within PO3's grasp, you join in a mutiny with the other 3 scribes and kill him. Afterwards, Grimora takes it upon herself to delete the game. As you slowly watch everything around you fade away in the slow deletion process, you play each of the other 3 scribes. But this time it's not in a competitive context, rife with pressure and danger. You no longer have any lives to lose. There are no scales that signal either victory or defeat. Each scribe simply wants to play in order to keep playing, just to make their lives last a little longer. The games have taken on a melancholic and nostalgic tone. You shake hands at the end, grateful now to the very man who was your antagonist in Act 1. You beat the game, it's apparently fully deleted, and we close with the last surviving footage of Luke. He doesn't know it yet, but he's in his last moments. Speaking with a reporter in order to expose the malpractice of Game Funa and the malice of Inscryption itself, as a piece of literal malware and also as a literally evil artifact, Luke is distracted by a knock at his door. That persistent representative of Game Funa has returned. This time, as soon as Luke answers, she shoots him dead. The camera falls to the floor, and she collects the floppy disk. The game is over. I'll pause here to note that, as people who played through the alternate reality game know, the broader game of Inscryption goes on from here. Eventually, you learn that PO3 survived the deletion, copied the game, and put that game and all the video footage of Luke's gameplay online in the form of the game Inscryption, which we ourselves have just played. And that's the real ending. Thus far, at least. We'll get a bit into some of that later. There's so much going on here, it's hard to know where to start. But I'd like to begin at the very beginning. The title itself, Inscryption. A Halloween-y title, for sure. Spookily polysyllabic, anachronistic, and eerily occult. And, moreover, misspelled. Both in Inscryption and Scribes, the central letter, which should be I, has been replaced with Y. And I take this to be the game's first clue as to its true meaning, or at least one of its core themes. Identity. In lieu of a central I, in lieu of a stable self, we find instead a why, a question occurring where we usually expect an identity. I'd also pause here to say that if this sounds like a stretch, or like I'm reading too much into this, I'd emphasize that there's practically no other game currently on the market that encourages its players to be code breakers in the same way Inscryption does. Everything the game's creator Daniel Mullins has done here is deliberate, and particularly with these key terms, the spelling is no accident or superficial indulgence. It means something. Inscryption is a game in which our own identity is in flux, Are we the player, the RPG avatar, Luke Carter, or the unlucky person who found and played Inscryption after Carter? Inscryption is a game in which the characters themselves are in flux, with our friends the Stoat, the Stinkbug, and the Stunted Wolf from Act 1 turning out to be PO3, Grimora, and Magnificus. And Inscryption is a game in which the game's own identity is in flux. Think of the laundry list of genres that all have a valid claim to defining the game, from roguelike to puzzle to horror. This fixation on identity is made apparent in the spelling of the key terms of the game itself. There is a Y where an I should be. Interesting as all this is, though, the theme of questioning identity, the various picking up and putting down of masks, means so much more when we consider it in conjunction with Inscryption's other key theme, ambition. And here we'll be getting into the deeper lore of Inscryption, so let me preface this by saying the following is broadly accurate to the best of my knowledge based on the research I've conducted in studying the work of many, many others who have decoded many secret aspects of the game. Some of the more granular aspects of the following may be slightly broad or inexact, in which case I apologize, but I'm painting with a broad brush here in order to keep the focus on the thematic argument of Inscryption rather than the literal plot. There's some debate about specifics, but this is as clear and agreed upon description of the background story I could find. And please keep in mind I'm also leaving a lot out. I'd invite people to let me know in the comment section if they feel I've maybe overlooked something or if there's anything it'd be cool to add to this discussion. So, with that disclaimer out of the way, let's proceed. The evil at the heart of Inscryption comes from Hitler, who, according to the lore of the game, carried on him at the time of his death a set of cards from one of the oldest card games in recorded history, and the order of those cards constituted something called the Karnoffel Code, that could quite possibly blow up much of the world by activating a Nazi doomsday device. Oh, and the code itself was created by the devil. That's right, the devil, who is also the CEO of Game Funa under his pseudonym Lou Natus. As CEO of Game Funa, the devil intended to use the game of Inscryption to protect and spread the old code, which is the transcribed version of the Karnoffel Code in computer legible form. In other words, it's what's on the floppy disk. Once we know this context, once we know the evil at Inscryption's core comes from, again, literally, Hitler and the devil, it becomes clear why PO3's ambition to rule the world wreaks such havoc on Inscryption, and once we've called to mind World War II, a war which saw such evil it led to the invention and deployment of a technology that could literally end the world, we can see why the endgame of Inscryption, and especially the section with Magnificus, is so haunted by the dilemma of annihilating a whole world in order to defeat an evil. Inscryption was first developed by Daniel Mullins in response to the prompt, "Sacrifices must be made," and the game is obsessed with the sacrifices made in the name of evil, maniacal ambition. Casey Hobbs should have destroyed the floppy disk of Inscryption once she found it. She shouldn't have continued to work on the game when she knew about its true power. She shouldn't have tried to crack the code for herself. But, for reasons left generally open to interpretation, she didn't destroy the floppy disk. She kept working on the game. Maybe she didn't destroy or hand over the floppy disk because she was so lonely that even the companionship of Leshy was better than nothing, and she couldn't bear the thought of her only friends being obliterated. There's something to be said for that line of thinking, but I myself am partial to another theory, which is this. Casey's work on Inscryption was deeply satisfying to her on a creative level. Regardless of why, the end result of her time with the game is that it stimulated and fulfilled her ambition as a developer. We know this from Inscryption's postgame, when you can play a comprehensive new mode entitled Casey's Mod. Casey's Mod entails your replaying a section of the game under certain challenge restrictions, which become increasingly difficult, and as a reward, you then unlock new content and are even able to read diary entries Casey kept while she was making this mod. Casey was clearly brilliant and very good at this game. She thrilled at being challenged, and the challenge of Inscryption engaged her in a creative way. She liked who she was when she was working on Inscryption. Thus, she didn't want to destroy it. In other words, Casey's ambition to see herself as a creative developer granted her the comfort of a validated identity, and yet it also necessitated the sacrifice of her very life, and indirectly, the lives of all others who came into contact with this floppy disk. Meanwhile, we have Luke Carter, who also fell prey to an ambition that seemed to grant him an identity and, as a result, made the greatest possible sacrifice. Luke Carter should have just destroyed the floppy disk as well, or at the very least reported it sooner to relevant authorities. But his ambition as a YouTuber compelled him to keep recording, keep playing through the game, keep trying to unearth the game's true nature, the story behind Inscryption. Why? Because he felt creatively satisfied in doing so. Because doing all of that recording and investigating and gaming is what a good YouTuber does. And Luke, too, winds up sacrificing his very life. I'd add a brief note here. Some would claim that it wasn't ambition at all that led to Luke and Casey's obsession with Inscryption. It was instead the evil power of the old data, the Carnoffel Code itself exerting the devil's magic influence on both these mere mortals. In other words, it was the devil's magic, not the character's psychology. My response to that would be, okay, let's assume that's correct, and in the fiction of the game, it was the devil's magic that kept Luke and Casey playing. As we've already discussed, Daniel Mullins is a very intentional writer, and everything in Inscryption means something. So, in the canon of Western literature, what is it that the devil means? What value is he continually associated with throughout history, from Dante and Milton to today? The answer, of course, is the worst sin of all, the lowest of all the deadly sins: pride. And what is pride? Thinking too much of oneself. The devil is pride, and pride is nothing more than an ambitious obsession with one's own identity. Thus, even if we agree that it was the devil's magic through the old data and Carnoffel Code that kept Luke and Casey playing, we arrive at the same conclusion. The forces at hand, the forces at the center of Inscryption, remain ambition and identity, regardless of whether you consider it magic or metaphor. Ambition and identity, pride. All of these things led both Luke and Casey to make the ultimate sacrifice. Finally, we too, as players, end up sacrificing quite a bit. In order to even play the game in Act 1, you'll have to sacrifice your teeth, your eye, not to mention the cards themselves. And why? Because we have our own ambition, to beat the game, to be good at Inscryption. At every turn, ambition seems to hold the answer to the question of our identity. And in our pursuit of that ambition and that identity, sacrifices must be made. Eventually, we ourselves are sacrificed. In the most monstrous of circumstances, even the lives of others, countless others, are sacrificed in the name of ambition. I think part of what Inscryption is saying is that there's something inherently scary about ambition, creative ambition in particular. It's probably worth remembering here that Hitler himself was a failed painter whose desperate desire for respect, status, and admiration shaped much of his life. There's something scary about being ambitious enough that you could make any sacrifice, that you would sacrifice yourself, that you would sacrifice others. And the flip side of the coin is this: people resort to doing scary things because they themselves are scared. And the reason we turn to ambition is because the question of identity scares us stiff. It's terrifying to feel like there's a Y where an I should be. Even if we have to transform over and over again, if we have to shapeshift, put ourselves into a card, into a floppy disk, into harm's way, we'd happily accept any of those risks, so long as it meant that we didn't have to contend with the true horror of lacking a single self, which is to say, the horror of just living real life. This, of course, is the reason people love dressing up for Halloween. Not to scare others, but to comfort themselves, for a little while, with the fantasy of disguise, adopting a new identity. They all know that the scariest thing of all is to possess not a plastic mask behind which you can hide, but merely a vulnerable, changing face. A mask you can't remove.